Brie, what brings you to this conference today?
I came this morning with Denise O'Brien, the MC of the conference, and I offered the morning mindfulness meditation.
And what was the mindfulness meditation about? What did you do there?
Well, that was to set the tone of the conference and sort of bring people into their bodies and come to an intention focus on what we're coming here to do today together.
So did they feel that a calming presence was necessary to get the day started on the right foot?
Well, I think with humans being how humans are, it can always be helpful for us to take a few moments to feel the breath and feel the body and just pay attention to the present moment. Because really that's where the great creative manifestations, birth from.
Now, what part of this conference holds the greatest interest for you?
Oh, that's hard to say. I've been really inspired by the speakers that I've seen so far this morning. Kimberly King, winner of the Eleanor Roosevelt Humanitarian Award, was just fantastic. Her words stayed with me. One of the things she said was, one of the great questions that we have is, how will we, leave this room? Because we're all eagles in this room. It's some of the brightest, most fertile minds in Silicon Valley. And what eagles do is they have this great big wingspan. So how do eagles, A, learn to share the sky? And B, what do? Do we leave this room as lone eagles, or are we able to actually leave this room with a constellation of hope, working together? And I think that is an essential question when it comes to resolving the issues.
So what are your hopes for the conference? How will you know that it was a success for you?
Well, I'm just excited about what happens when they bring everything together. I know that they have thought groups going on right now where all of the members and participants are actually actively sharing their own feedback and what they think some of the solutions are. And so I'm really interested to see how that all comes together at the end and what we come up with as a whole, as a think tank here together.
Now, the conference is dealing with a number of issues. Is there any specific issue that you're specifically involved with? I
was also really inspired by John Madison, the Chief Medical Officer and Assistant Medical Director of Kaiser Permanente, his talk this morning, which basically took us on a journey of recognizing the need for a more empathic humanity and for more compassion-based approaches, which is actually a theme that I'm seeing woven through a lot of the dialogue that I'm seeing here today. And to take a more prevention-based approach to tackling health issues, I think, is really important. In my work, I'm the founder of Love the Skin You're In, which is a young women's empowerment, health, media literacy, and healthy body esteem program.
Love the Skin You're In.
It's called Love the Skin You're In. It's lovetheskinyourin.net. And so one of the things that I teach is really helping girls come to a positive sense of self and self-acceptance in the face of unrealistic media portrayals of women and just all the various behavioral patterns that result from those unrealistic portrayals.
Now, how do you do that? Is self-esteem something that you can give to somebody?
It's not something that you can give to somebody, but you can stand and you can look into their eyes and you can reflect back to them their own inherent radiance. And you can provide substantial inspiration for them to recognize that which already exists within them. And so it's just a spark. It's really just about adding a little bit of fuel to a fire that is already alive within them. It just has gotten covered up by the culture that we share.
You mean if one person is more accepting of them, that'll give them a little boost, which maybe will carry over to the rest of their lives?
Sure, being accepting of them is one thing, and just speaking from a place that is really authentic, and really calling a spade and saying, yeah, wow, we have an insane situation here. We are facing, the world issues that we're facing right now are insane. These really are, in the very near future, going to be matters of life and death for our Earth and for humanity. And so what do we do in the face of that? Well, we can recognize the moment. We can recognize that each day is actually a gift, and that we have potential to be creators and collaborators in the making of the future of humanity.
What do you think is the most important problem that we have to deal with?
Status of women. I think worldwide, the status of women, if you look on the Center for Partnership Studies, which I work with intimately, and Dr. Rianne Eisler down in Carmel, the Center for Partnership Studies did a study based on 84 different countries around the world, and they actually found that the status of women is a greater predictor of a country's long-term economic prosperity than the GDP is. And so you see in countries like Norway, wherein women are occupying 40% of parliamentary seats, more caregiving practices. And when you have more caregiving practices, the people are getting nourished and nurtured and sustained. The land, the environment is getting nourished and nurtured and sustained. So if we can go to the root of it, if we can educate the girls worldwide and women around the world as well, then we can start to actually uproot some of the major social malheur. And I don't think, personally, that anything is going to change until we address the status of women worldwide.
Now, if women become more empowered, would men feel threatened that this is going to come at their expense? They'll be less empowered?
Well, it's very important to recognize that this is a partnership movement. And so it's not about women over men. It's actually about, the equality that we all know actually exists between men and women. And it's about recognizing that equality by having women occupy more parliamentary seats and have more voice. So if women are 52% of the population and they're occupying half of the parliamentary seats, we all together are going to have a much better chance of a hopeful future.
But do you find much resistance on the part of men who say, well, we have all the power now and we would like to keep it that way?
Well, I think that is problematic, and that the beautiful thing about this conference is that a lot of the male individuals that are here are very evolved men that are really solution oriented. And I was just talking to the gentleman from NASA who spoke this morning, and I presented this to him, and he said fundamental, that he's been looking at that as well. And so since these are the most forward thinking people around, they're in embrace of these kinds of ideas.
Now, when you say empowerment for women, do you mean better education, higher pay, economic empowerment?
Oh, sure. Equal pay for equal work is really important. Basically getting rid of, ideally violence against women, looking at underprivileged countries, just the kinds of conditions that women live in, and as well even in a first world country, like we live in today, wherein so many women will live in poverty over 65 here, and that has been their reward for being mothers and caregivers and winding up divorce and then not having enough income going into the future.
Now in third world countries, it's not just the women who are empowered. I mean, people in general are empowered and struggling desperately to survive for one more day. Is there any concern that if you focus on women, then, well, what about the men? They have problems too.
Disproportionately, in fact, the world's poor are women and children. Disproportionately, and I can't jog the statistic right now, but it's an astronomical statistic that points to the fact that it is actually women and children that are the most impoverished ones around the world. So if we can create that shift, then all beings flourish and all beings thrive. And you can see cultures, like if you look back to Minoan Crete, right? There were cultures, partnership cultures, where men and women lived together very harmoniously, and there was, there was next to no war in many of these cultures, and peace actually was the dominant value. And when they actually sort of plumed through the research, what did they find? The difference in these cultures was that women and men lived together in partnership, and women and their bodies were seen as a site of great life and light and mystery and regeneration and rejuvenation, and so this was actually, this is a secret key that the world needs to know more about.
Well, there have been some efforts to get men more involved in child-raising efforts.
Yeah.
Do you think that women will always dominate the field of child-raising? They'll always be the ones primarily concerned just because of biology?
Well, I mean, that's not necessarily going to be the case moving forward. We are seeing a lot more men that are interested in that, although predominantly the caregiving roles are still women predominantly. And when I say caregiving, I'm talking not just about caring for children. Of course, we've got to recognize 85% of brain development happens, in these wee years of life, right? All of this happens before age 5. And so this is actually the most crucial time. And so, of course, it really merits great financial value and compensation. But I'm also talking about caregiving as caring for the elderly, like any caregiving profession. And we really are increasingly seeing men and women across the board being interested in these kinds of professions. So it's really allocating funding, because we manage to find and allocate the funding for the things that we value, right? So if you look at, there's endless money that's available for war and for prisons and things like that. But how come that same money is not necessarily available for, school lunch programs or childcare? So these are just important questions to consider, I think, in this great discussion.
Okay, we're just about out of time. Do you have any more comments you'd like to add now that you're facing this massive audience and you have them ready to hear whatever you have to say?
Well, I think it's just a wonderful thing to be able to, bring this back to feeling the body and feeling the breath and recognizing that we really are all in this together. That's what this conference is about today, and I'm really excited to be a part of it.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Thank
Brie
you.
Mathers.